Up next on the Jeff Crilley Show, millions of Americans are unemployed and the talent war could not be more fierce. We'll talk to a best-selling author next.
Many are predicting that the worst is yet to come, which is unfortunate, said one person here. Until now, they've enjoyed the reputation of being the nation's icebox.
Watched a burglar in his home this morning by webcam.
As a journalist of over 25 years, stories are what make my world turn.
Reporting live from the Dallas newsroom tonight, Jeff Crilley, Fox 4 News.
But in 2008, I took the jump from my familiar life and started a PR firm from my home.
We're talking about anyone with a camcorder like the one I'm using becomes a television network.
We started slowly growing the company, and we now have over 100 clients, and we've branched into the world of live digital broadcasting. I now own 8 different TV studios and have a huge team, and the stories that I now get to share are sometimes the most important of my life. Life has a funny way of coming around full circle. This is the Jeff Crilley Show. Well, just about all of us have worked for companies that are revolving doors. Just when talent gets up to a certain level, they're gone. And I've read studies that say that the cost of recruiting, training, hiring new employees can be anywhere between half a year's salary to a year and a half salary. So bosses, please watch this and listen to my next guest, George Randle. He is the co-author of the best-selling book, The Talent War, and I love the name of the book because there's a double meaning. Talk about the book.
So my co-author and I, Mike Sorelli, and I like to joke, you know, he gets these ideas, and we always thought we had a book, and he calls me in the middle of one night, and I think it's because his wife was making him watch Real Housewives of Beverly Hills.
Sure.
And Navy SEALs just don't usually do it. So he calls me up, he says, George, you know, we got to write a book. And, you know, there's a lot of people who've talked about talent, a lot of people who've talked about leadership, but I don't think anybody's ever talked about character. And there's this fascination with special operations, and so we decided to pull what makes special operations special into the business world and what the business world could learn from that. So we combined his 20 years of special operations, and I'm a veteran, but my 20 years in the talent space, and kind of put them together and thought, well, how can we help strengthen the U.S. economy and provide something that people can use?
Well, I've written a book myself, and the process can be both exhilarating and frightening. Was it hard, especially with a co-author?
Well, with Mike, and then we had Josh Cotton as a key contributor, but Mike and I, it went far better. We are two A-type personalities through and through. Mm-hmm. But we operated under the best idea wins. So even if I thought I had a piece of a chapter locked down, Mike would say, no, it resonates better with this. And if it made our book better, it's just like, let's go with it. He'd talk about special operations, of which I've not been a part. It's like, wait, we need to word it this way, it'll resonate. He's like, yep, let's go for it. And so we were able to click through it a lot faster than I thought. I think where it's challenging is you've got so much in your head,
right? And
getting that down into words and in a crisp fashion. Now, by the way, we did an audiobook. That was the most brutal process of my entire life. That was difficult. I had no idea. Even Mike was smoked at the end of doing it.
Okay, so there are business owners watching this right now say, well, there's a big difference between the military and and civilian life. But would you disagree with that?
As far as the mission, yes. I mean, what the military's trained to do, what the military's asked to do is different than corporations. But what they have in common is they all revolve around people. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of the thing, you know, that we started with special operations is nobody comes to the table with special operations experience. So they had to become, by default, experts in potential-based hiring. So companies could learn a lot from that. I mean, because your products, we all know, I mean, how quickly does your phone change? How quickly you get an upgrade? How quickly has something been outdated? The one constant that you have is your people and your talent. And so to that degree, winning and having the world's most powerful military is because of the people. The reason we have the most powerful economy is because of the people. So we were trying to kind of mesh those two together. As different as it may be for some people, the core is still the same.
Yes. And I would encourage my audience to go to his website and follow him because he's very active on social media. He's got some great tips. Let's roll one video right now.
In our book, you know, one of the great people we were privileged to interview was Tracy Keogh, the CHRO of HP. And one of the things that she absolutely was dead set on is I don't want people who haven't failed. And so resiliency is absolutely one of those characteristics that you have to dig into. You have to be asking people questions about where they failed, why they failed, what did they learn. And people who haven't failed, they either haven't been challenged enough, they're not being authentic, they're not being truthful, but it's absolutely something you have to dig into. You want people who have failed, who have faced challenges, and you've got to be able to see their resilience. Going back to the VUCA environment and COVID, if you're not resilient, if you haven't made it through tough times, it's not a great hire to make.
I could listen to you all day. You gave me some tips right before we went on the air. One of the takeaways was hire for character and train for skill. Explain that.
Well, you know, one of the great quotes that we let in that should resonate with people, at least around this area, Southwest Airlines. Herb Kelleher says, I don't care what your skills are. I want good attitude. I want people with attitude. You know, the reason that we say hire for character and train for skill, now we're not saying, and nowhere in the book do we say, hire a CEO who is coming out of college. Hire somebody who's a computer programmer that doesn't know how to program. That's not it. It's just that skill and experience isn't necessarily predictive of success, but character is. Those are the things that you carry through. And, you know, the character points of drive, resiliency, integrity, those are the things that are predictive of success. And, you know, when we talked about special operations as potential-based hiring, because they don't have experience, they had to look deeply and analytically at what makes their people special. Sure. And resiliency, you know, was one of those things top of the list.
Let's talk about leadership, because I think a challenge that all CEOs and department heads face now is that half of their workforce might be working from home. And it's different to lead in the physical world versus leading in a Zoom world. Does your book address that?
We didn't. It came out, and we were wrapping up right as the pandemic,
Sure.
you know, kind of came out. But what's interesting about the timing of the book is that because we are so dead set on hiring for character, if you were hiring for character, the COVID situation affected people a whole lot less. Where they were located, their drive, their resiliency, their integrity, their problem solving, emotional, and effective intelligence. If you had those characteristics, it doesn't matter where the person is. If they're remote, if they're at home, they're on Zoom, they're still driving hard. They're still working really, really hard for your company. So, you know, as leaders, that's why character counts, because who saw or who had experience in a pandemic?
Yes.
Nobody.
One of the things that you told me before we went on was that bosses need to treat human capital like they do financial capital. Expand on that, please.
Yeah, I for some reason it came up in a podcast, and Mike goes, oh, we've got to write that down. But it was basically that business leaders, especially C-suite executives, should put the same rigor, focus, and discipline on their human capital as they do their financial capital. The human capital is the driver of all of those things. And if you've been in corporate America at any length of time, you sat through a quarterly business review, you've sat through a sales review, and you've gone, as I call it, death by PowerPoint. You've gone through slide after slide after slide, number after number. And then somebody says, okay, here's our number ones and number twos, and they spend like 2 minutes on the talent piece, when that's what's really driving everything else.
Well, you've had a lot of success in the media. We're going to put up a Forbes article that had a feature on you. I am just very impressed with your passion for this. You do a lot of public speaking when we're not social distancing. Yeah. What kind of audiences do you like to speak to?
Really, hiring managers, people in charge of talent, C-suite executives, anybody that's a decision maker when it comes to people. Additionally, Mike and I do webinars for veterans that are transitioning so they can learn to articulate those skills, those character traits that would make them successful in business. But we like talking to everybody. As Mike says, we kind of nerd out on talent. And,
I love it.
Which is, nobody expects to grow up to be a recruiter like I have, and Mike would have never guessed that working in Joint Special Operations Command, he'd come out and be nerding out about talent, but we realized this is what we love, so we talk to anybody and everybody about it.
Let's talk a little bit about the generations, because I'm a boomer. I was born in '63, so I was like the last of the boomers, and I have a whole team of millennials and even some Gen Zs. Leading millennials and Gen Zs takes a special talent as well, doesn't it?
I think it does. It requires you to make sure that, well, first of all, I think one of the two most important parts of leadership, number one, is humility. And that would help you with millennials and other generations, because there's a lot to learn from those generations. And oh, by the way, from Mike and I's perspective, the millennials are the ones who fought the global war on terror. So we've seen the absolute best of those generations.
Sure.
And while there may be a gap, if you're a humble leader, if you realize that everybody's got something to contribute, you're tapping into that. So, take the time, listen to those new ideas. We have a couple millennials on our staff, and because they help with social media.
Sure.
Of course, they make fun of me in the process because I'm a little bit behind where they are. But, leading them just is one more challenge as a leader that you just need to embrace and take on.
Name some Fortune 500 CEOs that you admire.
Well, the Fortune 500 CEOs. So the CEO of J&J that we've named in the book, in the day, Herb Kelleher. I grew up and was very fortunate to work for Meg Whitman at HP and her CHRO, Tracy Keogh. And I shouldn't really, I don't know if I should say this, but I tend to admire the CHROs that are strategic a little bit more. The Tom Lokars, Don Robertson, Tracy Keoghs of the world, Patty McCord from Netflix, because they're the ones with talent. Those are the ones that I look to that are really enabling those CEOs to go do amazing things with their companies.
Yes. The ones that get all the ink are the Elon Musks and the Zuckerbergs and the Bezoses. What are those guys doing right, or what could they learn from reading your book?
Well, I think the one thing is that experience is overrated. Resumes are overrated. And people have a laundry list of objective requirements or objective accomplishments on their resume. That may or may not be applicable in your environment.
Sure.
You have to be looking at raw talent. You have to look at the attributes, the emotional intelligence, the effective intelligence, the drive, the resiliency, the adaptability. You have to look at all of those things, because the Facebooks of the world, they change so rapidly. Even though, we see a few things, it's still changing inside that company. Google, it's changing. Instagram, Microsoft, they change so fast. And you need those adaptable, smart, driven people that are up for the challenge, that are absolutely curious about what's coming down the pike. So I think they could learn, just like everybody could, that the character traits are what are going to propel your success. And really, humans are the one thing that can get better and better year over year over year with a little bit of investment. And they can really change the trajectory of your company.
Outstanding. Well, George, you've been an amazing guest. We're going to put your website up to end this segment. EFOverwatch.com is the website. Get in touch with George Randle for his book, and book him to speak, certainly. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This has been great. Thank you so much.
You're wonderful. That's it for now. We'll see you next time.